Good evening, everyone. 6:30, we're going to start the meeting. First order of business, since Hogan, at my request, asked Sheriff Birch to come to talk about the possibility of, if the Village of Lyons does dissolve, what the Sheriff's Department, if there's any additional help, would be available. So I was just wanting to give a little overview of what your thoughts are on any changes that might occur with the Sheriff's Department, if there's any additional cost for the Village of Lyons to have extra aid here to...
As I spoke last time at one of the 3 meetings that I attended, this is a local issue that the local folks have to make a decision on how they want their policing, how they want their coverage, how they want their government to work locally at the village or the town level. I'm here to react to what I have to do. And as I said before, I have 32 uniformed deputies, I have 7 sergeants, 8 investigators. We're a closest car concept in the county with the state police. If the PD went away, I would be able to add no more deputy sheriffs at the county level. I believe I'm already 5 short because of staffing issues from 5 o'clock in the afternoon until 9 o'clock at night. From 9 o'clock at night to 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm very good staff, but then again from 3 o'clock in the morning to 7 o'clock, I'm very lightly staffed. So last year the Sheriff's Office did about 33,000 complaints. When I ran for the office, I don't like to make this political because I feel that I'm sheriff of all the people, not just a party, but you have to run for this job. And when I ran, the big complaint was we weren't into the villages, we weren't into the communities to help out with community festivals. We weren't involved in Wayne. Now we're very heavily involved in all the communities. We're very heavily involved with the police departments. Not only were we not involved with Wayne is now housed in the Sheriff's Office, so there's no expense to the PDs. I have 2 full-time officers, a sergeant investigator and a deputy sheriff assigned to Wayne on a daily basis, and the supervisor kind of coordinates all the activities through the county for all the police departments. So I have no additional deputies. If the PD were to go away and no additional services were brought either to my office, the Sheriff's Office, if there was no town PD, if there was an emergency in the village or a call, it would go into the queue at the 911 center, it would be prioritized, and the call would be answered on a priority basis. The call would get answered. We would not have the patrol presence with the staffing that I currently have that the PD now is able to exhibit in the village.
Do you have any time frame would be dependent upon where the closest car was at the time of the call?
No, I don't. Now example, our collective bargaining agreement, during the day shift I have to have a minimum of 4 cars in the county with a supervisor. On the afternoon shift, depending on the day, like today is Thursday, I have to have a minimum of 4 cars and a supervisor. It's not a trade secret.
But it's 4 cars in the whole county?
In the whole county, that's correct. That's correct. And then at 9 o'clock, I'll have 11 cars from 9 o'clock till 3 o'clock, and then at 3 o'clock I'll drop down to 3. And that's in our collective and bargaining agreement. That's a foilable document, that you can look at. The only difference is on the afternoon shift, which runs from 5 o'clock in the afternoon till 3 o'clock in the morning, on Saturdays and Sundays, Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays, we go from 4 car minimum to 5.
How do you work it with the town of Village of Marion? Don't you have a substation there?
We do have a substation in the Village of Marion. We also have a substation in the town of Ontario, basically where the deputies go in, make their telephone calls. There's a computer in there to do paperwork, but we're not there's no funding involved. We don't pay for the space in the village, or the towns. There's no village. The town of Marion and the town of Ontario don't charge us for the space to use that space. They just donate to that.
Do they fund anything for the sheriff to be there?
No funding whatsoever.
Is there any towns that do that now? Fund you to be here?
No, there's no towns that we have a contract with. The only contract that I do have is through a federal grant with the Soda Central School District. We've done that since 2010, and we have Deputy Rick Halverson, who is assigned as the school resource officer for the Soda Central School District. That's really the only contract or grant I have in regards to having deputy work, you know, not for calls for service. But I have no contracts with any municipality, village, or town.
Do you have any plans to increase the security in Lyons, being the county seat, with all the buildings? And, you know, last week we had guys with guns up there in Van Marder Lane.
Well, the sheriff's office, as sheriff, I'm co-employer. So as the sheriff, my duty is task, duty, and function of the sheriff's office, okay? I get my money from the county board of supervisors, and the budget that I present and that I get, I still have to go to them anytime that I do a budget modification or anything like that. So any additional services that I would have to go, I would have to present a resolution to the board for any additional monies or services to provide to any municipality.
Sure, if I could ask a couple of questions. Your contract with Soda School District for Deputy Halverson, that's a reimbursement for what you feel is the legitimate cost to the county of a deputy. Do you have a cost on that?
Yeah, it's not what I feel the cost should be, it's what the actual cost is, and that charges $125,000 to the school district. That includes the deputy's salary, there's some overtime built in there, the benefit package, and the vehicle.
I was privileged to a study provided, or statistically provided by 911 dispatch, of average response times of municipal police departments, i.e. village police departments versus road patrol on the closest car dispatch policy. Do you know offhand what the difference is between response time for emergency calls?
That's actually a study that I asked them to do in January 10 when I took office. Roughly, the police departments are about a 4-minute response. Sheriff's office and state police run between 7.5 and 8.5 minutes to emergency calls. And non-emergency calls, we're running probably about 11 or 12 minutes. Now, the other thing everybody needs to know is we have a balance in this county of, you know, state police, the local police departments, and the sheriff's office. And since we are a closest car concept, anytime any one of those gets thrown off or off kilter, that greatly changes what the response time is, not only to the local police departments, but also to the state police and the sheriff's office. So if there's more calls for service, and we have to wait longer for those calls for service for a deputy to get to the victim or the complainant, then what it takes is those calls for service, for emergencies, if they become longer, then the calls for service for non-emergency calls is going to be longer. So if the law enforcement availability is shrunk, okay, then emergency calls for service are going to take longer throughout the whole county, and non-emergency calls for service are going to be pushed back and take longer throughout the county.
So your response time with this study is based on your current staffing and your current calls for service. If the Lyons Police Department were to go away and 6,000 more calls for service a year were thrown into the mix, how do you feel that would impact your response times?
Well, if I could just correct you, Chief, and it's just a minor correction. It's not a study, it's the actual numbers that they query out of the system. So it's not, you know, an opinion or anything like that. It's the actual time and the numbers. And there's a couple variables in there, and we explain that at the bottom of the sheet that I get every month. But again, as I had just previously spoken before you asked that question, if it's like anything else, I have reduced the sheriff's office staff and asked them to do more. You know, we always hear this, you got to do more with less, you got to do more with less. I can't do any more because I'm already at less. That's the bottom line. I mean, I've reduced 8 full-time jobs in the jail of the corrections officers. The court security, I've reduced that by 2 positions, all done by studies on what we need. And again, on the roadside, I personally believe right now I'm short 5 guys, but there's no way I can feel comfortable going to the board of supervisors under the economic state we are in, present levy, you know, to say we've got to wait till the economy to kick around to do that. And I say this with all due respect to everyone. The sheriff's office is no better than any other law enforcement agency in this county. State police, any police department. We do different things than the police departments do. And a lot of people don't realize all the things that we do. They see our red and white cars pull in and out of this village, they think all we do is police work. But we have the, you know, we have almost 85 employees, almost, we have 85 full-time employees and about 15 part-time employees in the jail. You know, we do civil work, serve subpoenas and papers. You know, we have a Marine Patrol. We have 7 different specialty teams. So we do different things than the police departments do. You know, we've supplemented the Lyons Police Department in the last 3 years with either 2 or 3 computers.
Yeah, 2 that I know of. 2 of the new,
Right,
the new
2
ruggedized
at
ones.
$4,000 a piece, all came out of my budget. I pushed out probably about, I want to say at this point about 12 or 13, maybe 15 computers to the local police departments. All come out of my budget. Again, the concept is we're closest car. You know, it doesn't matter what uniform we're wearing, we got to get the job done. As far as training goes, I brought all the police departments and the state police to the sheriff's office to do training. You know, not that we're one organization, but again, we're the closest car concept. But to get to your question, you know, there are 6,000 calls that, from what your annual report says, I think about 5,200 last year or something like that. Those calls will get answered, but again, in what timely manner will they get answered? I can't tell you that. If it's a rainy night like tonight, and things are slow around and you have a call, we could have 2 cars here maybe very quickly. But if it's a busy night in other parts of the county and your call isn't prioritized to be an emergency, you know, it could be 10, 12, 15 minutes before we get here. And we will, and I can tell you this, under our present staffing conditions, okay, we will not have a car in the village all the time. I just don't have enough people to do that. I can't pull rabbits out of my hat.
What if there was funding available to staff a sheriff?
Well, you know, again, you know, we're talking about, do we have a blank sheet of paper of what we're going to do? Again, that is a decision I think that the town of Lyons has to make, okay? If there is no village, the town of Lyons has to make a decision for their constituents on what they want to do, and then if I was asked, I would react to what that request was. I mean, I could sit here, I'm a calculator guy. Everybody that knows me knows I'm a calculator guy. I could sit down and figure out all these, you know, things that we could do, but it's really a waste of my time, you know, to be able to figure that out when you don't know what you're being asked to provide.
Currently, right now, when there's an emergency call from a village resident, what happens?
That call would go
911.
that would go to 911. 911 would dispatch, you know, the Lyons PD.
So 911 dispatches.
Yep, 911 dispatches. That's not under the sheriff's office. Now, I will say this, okay? Let's take, I think we probably were in the village, we did about 1,300 calls in the village, but you got to remember those 1,300 calls, probably about 1,000 were transports and other things that weren't directly, you know, a citizen picking up the phone calling for us to come in. You know, I don't have that number, what that is, but I can say when the village is tied up on a call, it's not uncommon for a deputy to come in. If there's a second call at the same time, we'll come in and supplement the service that the PDs have. For example, the Maston has a town police department, generally run 24/7. There are some times that they have an open shift that we cover the whole town. But even when they're working, we'll average 150 to 200 calls a month in the town of Maston, and they even have a police department.
Mm-hmm. Sheriff, speaking of the town of Macedon, they have a town-wide police department, correct?
They do.
Do you know how many officers they have for the complete town, or for the whole town?
I want to say there's 5 or 6 full-time and the chief, and maybe 2 or 3 part-time. I'm not really sure. So I wouldn't want to go on the record to say that's the exact numbers. I'm not really sure. Do you know, Chief?
Not offhand.
I know that Chief Kalala took 2 part-time positions, made it into a full-time position, so I think they're at 5 full-time, the chief, and maybe 4 part-time, but I'm not sure on that. Yes, ma'am.
I know we are addressing the number of calls in the number of calls that your department has too. But I think one of the most important things that people talk to me about is the visibility of our police department. Our police department, there may be 2 cars on this, there may be 1 car on the south side of the village, another car on the north side of the village. They're patrolling constantly. They're moving people who are standing on street corners. They're looking to see who's on a street that it's at 2 o'clock in the morning. They don't belong on the street. This would be something that I'm assuming we're going to lose. We're not going to have that physical presence.
Exactly what you explained, the state police do, the sheriff's office does, and every PD across this county does the same thing. The difference is you're in a more condensed area, the deputies are working in a larger area. But when the deputies are driving through, say, my hometown, my little Hamlet Rose, okay, not mine, I live in it, you know, if there's people on the street at that time of the morning, they're doing the exact same thing. The thing is the deputies covering a much larger area. So you wouldn't have the patrol presence or the concentration of patrol as you speak of, okay, if you did not have a police department.
Any other questions?
I do.
Right.
I think the village does need a presence of the police department. The size of it may be determined by us or whoever is in charge, but my question to the sheriff is, if we were going to contract, say hypothetically speaking, we'd like to have someone cover 40 hours a week in the village, what, is it 125,000 is what you're saying per, that would cover all his benefits and everything for one person?
Benefits, uniform,
A car, everything.
a car, everything.
That's 40 hours a week.
Yep.
Because I was wondering, would it be in the
There is some overtime built in there, but I don't. It might be, you know, $4,000 or $5,000 overtime. I'm not sure on that. But that is the model that we, you know, that's the model that we charge, and we've costed that out, and we've been doing that for, you know, almost 3.5 years now with the Soda Center School District. So it's, I mean, that's just not a figure that I plucked out of the air. Came here to give you. That's an actual, you know, working concept that we have.
So is it a possibility to contract if we had to, or if it came up to the board in the town board? Is it something you're available to do, or is it something you can consider?
Again, that's something that, you know, we'd have to sit down and hash out all the details. I'd have to put a plan together, you know, with the, you know, the town. I'd have to present that in resolution form to the board of supervisors, because then I'm put in this odd situation where, again, I don't, you know, I'm in control of the funding, but the board of supervisors gives me the funding to do it, so I'm a co-employer. So I'd have to make sure that the board of supervisors would come along, you know, with me and approve that.
Sheriff, just one comment. From the Board of Supervisors standpoint, I know in Lyons, because of the county jail, county court system being here, DSS being here, we have a lot of unique situations sometimes because of the transient population. And as a supervisor on the board, I think that the county should, I'm not saying drop dollars to us, but I think they should help us out here in Lyons if we get to that point where some of the coverage needs to happen here in Lyons. I mean, that's just my personal opinion about that. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but...
Well, just let me give you a couple statistics. I have, you know, I work with the police chiefs. I consider them partners. And on the sheriff's office website, I pay for, out of the sheriff's office budget, Offender Watch. And if you go to www.waynecosheriff.org and you click on sex offender and go to this, you can put in there. So what I did today is I picked the center of the town of Lyons, which is our courthouse, 26 Church Street. And I put in, you can go a quarter-mile radius, half-mile radius, mile, 2-mile radius. So I picked a 1-mile radius because it covered the village of Lyons, okay, except for the corners. In the village of Lyons, you have 45 registered sex offenders that live in 22 different locations. Now, I'm going to assume that a lot of that is because it is the county seat with DSS here. Another statistic that I did, if I can find it, is I took the zip codes of the county and did an analysis of how many people were incarcerated from that zip code. And, you know, for example, Red Creek, which is in the northeast part of our county, the Red Creek School District, half of it's in Cuba County, half of it's in Wayne County. So for a 5-year period from 2007 to 2012, there were 91 people from that zip code of Red Creek area that were incarcerated in the Wayne County Jail. An average, you know, between 11 and 17 during that 5-year period. Let's take the town of Savannah, which is pretty much encompassed with the zip code. But there's, you know, South Butler goes into a little bit of that. Over a 5-year period, there were 190 people incarcerated from Savannah, averaging from, you know, 22 to about 39. Clyde zip code, which would include the town of Galen, the village of Clyde, and any postal people here? No postal. Oh! The Clyde zip code goes all the way into the hamlet of Rose on Wayne Center Road. Okay? So there were 440 people in that 5-year period that were incarcerated, anywhere between 75 and 90. Now the two biggest zip codes that people were incarcerated in the Wayne County Jail, the number 1 was Newark zip code. Now you want to stand up because that was your post office. Newark in 2007 was 238, 2008 290, 2009 321, 2010 304, 2011 247, 2012 201. For that 5-year period, it was 1,601. Now some of those people could have lived in, you know, the town of Arcadia, you know, sheriff's office, you know, state police arrest, but I would assume the majority of them came from the, you know, Arcadia arrest. And then Lyons, for that same period, 2007 had 258 incarcerations, 2007 258, 2009 266, or 2008 266, 2009 221, 2010 178, 2011 201, 2012 last year 172, for just short of 1,300, 1,296. You know, again, I'm going to say probably, you know, half of them came, half or more came from the Lyons PD arrest. So, you know, this is a document that I can forward to you. You can get this document off the website. So, you know, when you speak of the county seat, it's kind of like the internet. A lot of good things come, a lot of not so good things.
Well, if there's no more questions from the
I got one more.
All right.
So, I mean, you're averaging around 250 a year arrests, incarcerations.
Oh no, incarcerations we average 2,000.
Well, what'd you just say? 1,296. Those were arrests.
Those were 1,296 were a 5-year.
5 years.
5 years from 14489. When we
Right.
booked somebody in, they gave Lyons that zip code as where they live.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm just averaging about 250 a year over 5 years.
From Lyons.
So you have 6,000 calls, and I'm saying you have all these calls and only 250 actual arrests. So
Well, no, no, only 250 a year from Lyons were incarcerated in the jail.
Okay.
A lot of people we arrest, all law enforcement, could get issued an appearance ticket. We could arraign them in front of a judge. They could get ROR'd and not go to jail. Not everyone we arrest goes to jail.
Okay, so this isn't the total arrests,
No, it's not total arrests. I
incarceration.
think, Chief, you had like 500 arrests last year or something like that?
Yeah.
So not everybody arrested goes to jail.
Sheriff, I just did, the number for the Solis police officer, the sheriff up at the school, that was 126,000, correct?
125.
125.
Yeah.
I just did some rough numbers here real quick, and going with some of your factors from last year's budget at the county, overtime factors and stuff like that to cover the positions, and vacations and stuff like that. If we were to ask for 24/7 coverage here in Lyons, I come up with a rough number of about 650,000. Rough number, give or take,
So that would be...
if we contracted it out.
Yeah, well, to cover a post, I think it's 5.2 full-time equivalent is what you have to have.
Yeah.
So you took 5 times the 125,
Roughly, yeah.
650.
Yes.
You know, I'm not saying that I can do that for 650, because there's other things you have to, you know, kick in there. But, I'd really have to study what kind of, you know, felony work you're doing, because it's the felony work and it's the drug investigations that take a lot of time. And if you're just talking calls for service, you know, I'd have to sit down and take a look at how that would work. But then again, we're not talking about if it was a contract situation, there is no more village. And they're not going to, now they may, I shouldn't say that, but I haven't seen it happen from the meetings I went to. It hasn't happened since like 1970 some, where they allowed a police district. Am I correct to say that? So I'm going to assume you're not going to be able to have a police district. So that would cover the town. So I'd have to sit down and, I mean, if you take 5 times, you know, your math is right, I don't know if the service would be right. And that's something that, you know, we'd have to sit down and talk about. I mean, and to be frank with you, somebody's going to have to put on more employees. Who's going to do that? That's the question of what your constituents are going to have to decide. Because I believe if there isn't some type of, with the numbers that you have, you just can't disregard, you know, 6,000 numbers. You know, somebody's going to have to take up those numbers, and I believe Lyons is different than Macedon, and let me explain why I say that. Macedon is more of a suburb type community where it doesn't have a population density like the village of Lyons has in a 1 mile radius. You know, Macedon is just short of 10,000 people, but it's 10,000 people through the whole town. I mean, almost when you drive from Perrington or Fairport into, you know, Macedon, it's just, Lyons, you have a condensed space in a mile and a half. It is the county seat. You do have, you know, some, what I'll say, special need population, and some transient population that needs special attention. And I'll just give you this to, and I don't say this to alarm anyone, you know, you have 45 in a 1 mile radius, 45 sex offenders. You have 60 sex offenders in the town of Lyons, in the entire county.
Why do we have them all?
So
Tell me.
services.
Why do we have them all? Why aren't they spread out among the county?
It's that building right up the street.
Yeah,
They're placed because the availability of transient housing.
In the entire county, there's 280. You have what?
we have our share.
1/6 of the sex offender population.
That's nice to know.
Do your statistics show how many calls there were in the township itself?
I do have that.
Social services. Social services.
That's why Canada Day was the county seat of Ontario. Social services in That's an old excuse.
2011, in the town of Lyons, we did just short of 2,700 calls. That's 2,692. But, you know, I'm going to say 1,000 of those calls, well, yeah, about 1,000 of those calls are what I'm going to call filler calls, okay? Property checks. And a property check is a service that we provide at the sheriff's office when someone goes away, they go on vacation or whatever, they're not at home, they'll call up, we'll go out and check their property. I call them a filler call because when we're patrolling that neighborhood, you know, it doesn't matter if it's, let's say our day shift, it starts at 7 o'clock in the morning, they get done at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. It really doesn't matter if we do that property check at, you know, 7:05, if we do it at 12 o'clock, if we do it at 3 o'clock. We're going to do that property check when we can in the neighborhood, when we're 7 and 2 and we don't have a call for service, an emergency or non-emergency call for service. So when deputies are on, you know, routine patrol, there's no calls coming in, you know, we do the property checks. And then there was another 200 that were, you know, transports from the jail to the town court. We had transports. So you know, I would say actual calls, we had probably about, you know, probably about 1,500 calls in the town. And then in 2012, we had about the same thing, about, you're just short, about 2,500 calls, 2,513, and you know, between transports and property checks was about 1,000, so take that off, so around 1,500. In the village, you know, we had 573 transports. They were all the Hall of Justice or to the village court, and you know, all those we logged total 1,395 calls that we represent in the village. And we had like 3 hang-up calls that maybe the PD was tied up. We took those. Right, 18 alarms. That was probably a backup to the PD, or they were tied up. Court details where we had trial. They were probably at the Hall of Justice or you know, county court. Court security details and things like that.
I'd like to comment on one of the statistics the sheriff brought up, not as a committee member, but as the chief. He brings up the number of sex offenders that are in the village. We really don't find that the sex offenders drive our statistical calls for service as much as the parolees that are placed here in transient housing. And at any given time, there's 20 to 25 parolees under direct supervision of parole officers that are residing in the village. Persons that are not native to the village but have been processed out of corrections into the village. And they do drive our calls for service.
Any other questions? Well, thank you very much for coming. Very enlightening, and appreciate your input.
Thank you very much. If you have any other questions, don't hesitate to call. That was that. A little nervous with the black ops.
You're not serving lunch, you never know.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, could you just give us a quick rundown of the number of employees in the Lyons Police Department?
Lyons Police Department currently is approved for staffing at 8 full-time, 5 part-time officers. We, at one of our committee meetings, we worked up what we felt would be the total cost of expanding that service into a full-time town police department, and I think, Brian, was it 825,000 maybe, somewhere around
25 or 35.
825, 835. This would include officers' wages based on the current collective bargaining agreement, current staffing levels, current equipment and operating budget. You've got contributions to state retirement, FICA, disability, comp, and that
How
would
many
be a
more,
bottom line
how many more
number.
employees do you think you would need to have a town police department?
I'm confident that I could do it at the current staffing.
Okay.
Is that current staff, when we're up to
The current approved staff. Right
approve, okay.
now we have 2 full-time openings that are being addressed by part-time officers. We're addressing it as well as we can under the restraints of civil service law, which restricts the number of hours they work, requires a couple of the part-time officers to work more hours. We are in the process of getting those 2 part-time officers, civil service certified, so that they can convert to a full-time competitive status. But yes, I'm very confident we could provide calls for service and a presence to the town police department with current staffing and budget.
Chief, when you say the town, you're talking the whole town?
The geographical...
We'll go north quite a few miles.
Right, the geographical boundaries of the town of Lyons.
Okay.
And you would have, obviously, you would have a reduced presence. You'd have to have an inside car and an outside car. You'd still have patrol. You'd have vehicle and traffic enforcement. You'd find you'd have increased calls for service. The sheriff...
I mean, east we don't go that far, and west we don't go that far.
No,
and south we don't go that far.
the sheriff is currently taking, by his statistics, approximately 15 calls for service into 1,500 calls for service in the town.
Now, would you have to do the whole town?
Yes. You have to. Your option is to have no police department or to have a town police department. The district. Actually, somebody brought up 1970s as a date. I don't know that it was that current, but there's no provision in state law for a police district. You could make special application the same way you could make special application for any bending of the state law.
Either you take care of the whole town or don't take care of nothing.
Right. That's right. And in all fairness to the town taxpayers, the citizens, as to whether you live in what was the village at one time or you live out on Middle Sodus Road, you know, you are still a taxpayer. You're still contributing to the cost of the police department, and you are deserving of the same level of service.
Now, let's say you got an accident out my way, okay, 6-7 miles out, okay. Would you have another car in the village to handle something that went down here, or
currently
are we looking for backup?
in our current staffing between the hours of 4 p.m. and 3 a.m. There's always at least 2 officers on duty, so you'd be able to keep a car in the village on patrol, and you would have a car respond to the call for service as to whether it's an accident or an incident outside the village. Just as the sheriff said, the backup calls and the backup service that we get from the sheriff and the state police, we would still be reaching out to those agencies for additional help in emergency type situations. We had that incident a couple of weeks ago, you know, that home invasion, the robbery, burglary, and we had probably 6 deputies here, and those deputies were able to provide a containment perimeter around where we felt the 3rd suspect was while our officers searched that perimeter. And we just can't pull 6 guys out of the air at 1 in the morning. You know, we're very fortunate that we have the services of the state or the Sheriff's Department for backup services. And we continue to access that as a town police department the same way we do as a village police department.
Sir. Hey, Diana. Didn't the town of Seneca Falls try to do a police district and was turned down by the state? Is that correct?
Was not officially turned down. It requires the request of the legislature, and the discussion kind of centered around a prevailing thought that the legislature would probably be reticent to approve creation of a district, which is recognized as a local government. So dissolution of a local government only to create another local government. A request was actually forwarded by the town to the state legislator, who basically said, unless it's requested by everyone, including the former village residents, including the village board, which was still in existence at the time, that individual was uncomfortable, moving it forward to the state legislature, so it was dropped there.
But Governor Como is philosophically opposed to creation of new districts and levels of government.
That was the prevailing thought.
Well, that's why we're dissolving the village, so that we would have a townwide government and not have a sub-government underneath the town government, basically.
What actually would be, if it's its own taxing jurisdiction, it's actually considered its own, to be a completely separate.
It would be just like a fire district, right? Yeah.
That's a taxing jurisdiction, yeah.
Right? So,
One comment too would be, Ryan was talking about getting more help from the sheriff's department. Now, if you guys go to a town-wide police force, they're actually getting off even easier.
yeah.
You know, we're losing more benefits, I guess, as a town person. Potentially.
There is no.
Tell him he can't talk.
You can't. If I let you, I have to let everybody else. So thank you for the comment. But we have open comments once a month.
This isn't that time of the month.
So come back in about 2 weeks.
I want to see how diplomatic you're going to be.
You're right. So, anyway, since you had already spoken, it's too late to retract.
So what he's saying is we're paying county taxes and state taxes for state police and county patrolmen, and if we go to a town-wide, what people are alluding to is going to a town-wide police department, we're actually
they're still going to be there. If there's
They're still gonna be there, but
if there's a call,
but we're also
the
going to
county
be doing
insurance-
something that we're already paying taxes for. So we're trying to get out of a double service now, and now we're going back. That would lead us to another double service.
well, no,
The town and the county.
and it depends on how much service you want. If you don't care about having police presence in the town pretty much 24 hours a day, then you don't pay for it. You're paying for extra services to have your own police department. So, yes, we're paying the county taxes, and we're paying state taxes, but if there's an emergency call and we have a town police department and our town officer is tied up doing something else, the state police and the sheriff will show up to answer the call. And because our police department's taking care of the first call, they're available to take care of the second one. Whereas if we don't have a police department and there's 3 calls within 20 minutes of each other, somebody's going to be waiting a long time. So it just depends what it's all going to boil down to what kind of service you want. If you want someone there in 10 minutes, you want to have your own police department. If you want to wait, he said 17 minutes. I know when it's a non-emergency call, when my burglar alarm went off, it was over half an hour before they called in and said, we're here. So, and that's 2 miles out of town.
Now, was that?
But where does your call go to? Not to get off the track. Where's your call go to?
It goes to 911. It goes to my
All
service.
calls go to 911.
Where does it go initially?
It goes to Time Warner's people. As soon as it's called, they call us, and if we don't answer in 30 seconds, it goes to the police department, 911.
Central Station burglar alarm, by NFPA standards, have to contact. They can make their key holder calls, and they can have their administrative procedures, but they have to be in contact with emergency dispatch services within 3 minutes of receiving the call.
Yeah, so it was half an hour from the time they got the call that they showed up and said, we're here and we don't see anything wrong.
And you weren't home.
We weren't home. So, but a door, it's a motion detector, something happened, so it's not as if, it's what you're willing to pay for, basically. But if you're not feeling well, you can.
Yeah, well, It's
No,
not
back to what I was-
contagious, it's lunch.
All right, back to what I was saying earlier. You know, you heard the sheriff talk, you know, he provides police protection for the whole county. Because of our unique situation here at the county seat, I'm dead, this is dead to my head. The county needs to provide either money or some protection to offset the cost of these village taxpayers. Because you guys in the village are paying taxes to that county, and they're not doing squat for us. So, however this turns out, somehow, whether you stay village, don't stay, doesn't matter. We gotta get some of those county dollars back to the village taxpayers. Absolutely.
Well, you have to get the rest of the county supervisors to agree with you. Well,
Good luck.
they're not gonna raise their people's taxes so they can give money to Lyons, I'll tell you that right now. So, at least in my opinion.
Brian, do you know what the total tax exempt assessed evaluation owned by the county is in the town of Lyons?
55 million.
$55 million worth of assessed property within the town of Lyons. It's asking the town of Lyons as to whether it's through the village or the town for services, and those are a variety of services, but without making contributions to the tax levy.
And Jim and I are working on that a little bit together, so.
Okay, well, we'll get back to that department later. Want to welcome Diane and Connie, and everybody got their reports, interviews into Denise, who gave them to Connie on Monday, and they're slowly reviewing everything that we have filled out. As they go along, they'll make notes and tell us what we did wrong or what we didn't complete properly. And so I'll just let everybody know now, we're not going to meet next week because it's going to take them 2 weeks, besides the other work they're doing, to review all the interviews. So,
Can I just interject that in the meantime, what we would like to do is begin contacting, through you, some of the subcommittees to actually review the findings so far. We've done some cursory review and we've identified some missing pieces of information, excuse me, that we think would really be pretty critical later on. And so what we thought we would do is work individually with the subcommittees and identify what those...
now that's what I was hoping you would do.
Yeah.
You know, you have everyone's contact number and you can set up, meet at the village hall or whatever and go over the...
Now, Sergi contacted me. You want a worksheet for the town ambulance, even though it's already a town function, and it's not, the recommendation is not to change it?
We need, well, we don't have any recommendations yet. I would hope we wouldn't, because everything is very premature yet until you see what the cost for all the services are currently. In order for that next very important step to look at service options for post-dissolution and how many people it's going to take to do X, Y, and Z, you need a good, strong baseline of exactly what these services are costing us. So across the board, if we could just have what the services are, and as importantly, and one of the other things we noticed is that not everybody gave us hours and frequency on each one of those services, because
what it actually takes to
what
deliver
it
the
takes,
service.
because as you go to the next step for post-dissolution, it's going to be very difficult to be able to cost out what that new organization looks like with that list of services if you don't know what those services are costing currently.
But not to be argumentative, but the ambulance is currently and exclusively a town service. It has absolutely no input from the village. It does service the village because the village is geographically located within the town, but it's exclusively a town service, the same as animal control and maintaining rural cemeteries. Why would that impact with or without the village?
Let us take a look at it. Well, it's part of the Public Safety Committee, right? Let us take a look at it. We'll sit down. We'll go through it, see what each of the sheets look like. We just know as we looked at a lot of these, you know, we're missing some of that data, and one of the things that popped out is we had no list of services for the ambulance. And we're trying to, what we really truly want to do is to be very consistent, to understand what every function does within the town and village, to determine duplication of services. And I know you're saying the ambulance doesn't fall into that, but you know, in order to come up with efficiencies and impact to the taxpayers, you need to know what is your baseline of what each service costs. So we'll take a look at it, and we're going to get together with the different committees. Just as an aside, what we're doing right now, while we're doing the services, we are costing out according to the two budgets, and we went down through, and what we're doing is each of the functions, whether it be police, whether it be fire department, getting a true cost of the entire department. So security, New York State retirement, health and medical, all of that, workman's compensation. Because as you know, when you budget for personnel and that type of cost, but there's other benefits in both within municipal accounting. You don't see them all in one spot. So that coupled with all of the services, you're going to get a complete picture of what each function does and what each function costs. And that's
the closest possible
closest
estimate.
possible.
Sometimes it's difficult to, to
You
nail down.
gotta include the revenues too.
Well, at this point, what we're looking at, the revenues don't tie directly into each function. I think the only one that
I gotta disagree there.
Well, no. I think what Connie's trying to say is sometimes revenue that's received isn't a single line to one function.
Right.
Okay.
It's
So
like
that's what she's trying to say.
I understand.
mortgage tax, state aid, like CHIPS is going to
Directly correlate.
Public Works. But there's a lot of that revenue that comes in, water and sewer is another exception, but a lot of them you can't look at that revenue line and say, oh, I know that goes to the police department, because it's not that clean cut, Jim.
Well, you can't tell now, but you're going to clarify that. Is that
Well,
what you're
we're
saying?
certainly going to have a discussion about revenue when we're looking at services, because that's an important consideration. If you're giving up a service and expecting that there's a cost savings associated with it, it does absolutely have to be part of the discussion that if a revenue piece goes away, it might end up being a wash.
Right.
And not a savings, but rather a wash.
Right.
By the same token, if there's a difference and one doesn't support the other, then it's something to consider.
Right.
So yeah, that's part of the discussion. But that's the importance of the initial kind of fact gathering stage that we're at right now. By gathering these pieces of information, it means that later when you're discussing options for service delivery, you can more easily explore the possibility of combining, rearranging, and you can do that understanding what the implications might be cost-wise.
Right.
But without the homework done now,
Right.
it's nothing more than speculation.
Right.
And just to kind of go back to something the sheriff said a little while ago, I very much appreciated the fact that he said, I can react to a question or a possibility by telling you what it might be like, but right now he really doesn't quite know what it is he's responding to. By the same token, if you gather together this information, the next stage after this stage is the speculative and okay, what are the possibilities? Having the information means that you can come up with some possibilities that are feasible based on the information we have now. You can feel somewhat confident that it's in the realm of possibilities to do it this way. Then he's got something solid, or anybody that you talk to about what that service, what the impact might be on the delivery of service. They're reacting or responding to something solid. And that's really what the course needs to be. Now fact gathering, next stage is the brainstorming and discussing possibilities, but you can narrow that discussion down to what actually works based on what we know.
Back to the ambulance, just what else do you need from the ambulance? I'm not following this, I guess.
We just took a real quick look at it. I'd like to take a better look. Diana and I are going through them, and just to see exactly what is it that we're missing, so that when we get together with the subcommittees, you'll be able to know, here's where we are, here is the cost of it, and these services, what we were looking for initially, and just, again, we just briefly went through them, there appeared to be a lot of services that had no time associated with them, whether it takes 2 hours to do them, whether, that kind of detail didn't appear to be in them on all of them, and we just got this week, so.
Well, yeah, we just got them, but right off the bat, one service delivery, one focus area, there were some services listed, and it said, in terms of frequency, it said once a month. Once a month, we don't know whether it's 30 hours once a month or whether it's 3 hours once a month. And then when it comes to costing, literally knowing how many people and how many hours, that gives us kind of a handle on what it takes to deliver that service. Those are those building blocks that we want to help you build right now.
Well, I'm just thinking about this. If we're looking at public safety, you have the police department, the fire department, and the ambulance. To do a per hour cost, or I don't know how, I'm not sure where you're going with this.
Well, how many people are how many people work, how many hours a week? Is the staff full-time? What's the cost?
We can give Paul Fair one of those worksheets and have him.
But they have that information. I mean, we budgeted the numbers for the ambulance on how many, the hours that we use.
Yeah, this is where the discussion about focusing on ambulance is coming from at this point. But let's just take, for example, police service. One particular service in the village is meter reading, right? Parking,
No.
or not meters, but parking enforcement.
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe that's not a great example, but it just popped into my head. So what does it cost for the parking enforcement? Is that a service that's considered critical or non-critical, or maybe that's not the best example, maybe you can help me think of a better one. But, just to have costed out in rough terms what that particular community service costs, then it becomes a discussion piece later. You know what that element of community policing costs.
I think
Does that help?
Well, I know where one of the hardest things is the sewer and water. To put numbers on a sewer break. You don't know how deep it is, you don't know where it is, things like that I can...
That level of detail.
Okay.
But rather, again, we'll work with those individual subcommittees and maybe help isolate what would be beneficial information. It doesn't have to be mired in detail, but again, we just want you to have enough of the basic information to be able to break out critical services that you would never want to discuss alternatives to, other maybe less critical services that you are willing to discuss. But you need to have the basic information that will allow you to discuss feasible service delivery options.
Right. My point was with public safety, a police call might take 2.5 hours on one call, a fire call might take 4 hours, and an ambulance call might take an hour. To bring that down to an actual number.
Yeah, no, we're not costing out calls as opposed to, we're just trying to narrow it down to basically service options and having kind of a fix on what the impact might be.
You're looking at like the DPW changes a fire hydrant. The average one takes 4 hours and 3 men. You want a cost of an average of $16 an hour times 4 for the 4 hours, and that's what you want for a fire hydrant replacement.
Just hours. All we're looking
That's what
for
you're looking
is
for.
hours per service.
Per service.
The
It's 4 men and it's 4 hours, you want 16 hours.
That's, yeah. And it may not even have to be to that level of detail, but let's maybe brush pickup is a better example. How much is being spent, and again, Connie's been doing a budget analysis from the top down, looking at budget. I was thinking a lot of that. But Connie's analysis of the fiscal impact from the top down, looking at the budget and looking at what's been budgeted in the current budget. What we're talking about is looking at it kind of from the bottom up, just to get a handle on the breakdown, because a lot of the budget is looking at the whole department cost and maybe some larger areas We're just talking about looking at it in terms of critical services, non-critical services, and combinations of services, especially when there's a service like brush pickup that, that might, appear in both budgets. How do they relate? So,
You touched base a little bit about revenues that are being brought into the village. If they're not earmarked for, say the courts bring in $30,000, is that earmarked just for the courts or it goes into the general fund? So how would you decipher how to dilute that through all the different entities? You can't.
That's kind of Connie's point about sometimes there's not a direct line between revenue and expense. And so that's why it's, but again, recognition
Unless it's a line item and earmarked just
Like
for that.
Chips is easy.
And
Chips,
that's a
you know, is
that's a
gonna-
revolving door though. That's whatever you put in, you get back.
And we have the fire department that the town reimburses us approximately.
And those types,
40%.
there are line items in the revenue that you know automatically. It's a fire contract, it's chips, but there's other ones, mortgage tax, utility tax, village
Sales
clerk fees,
tax,
those types of things
Yeah.
are really difficult because they are spread. So, I
And they
mean,
vary.
we're gonna take a look at them and then of course there'll be the determination which ones will go away, which ones would remain static depending on activity. So that's the next step. Right now we're just trying to take a step at a time. We're not ready for recommendations. We're not ready for pay raises. We're not ready for any of a lot of the things that we saw coming through here. We're just going to do one thing at a time.
What is your time frame on contacting the subcommittees?
within the next week, we're going to be contacting and setting up meetings with subcommittees. So you should expect to hear from us within the next
I
week.
think our videographer wants to do a swap.
Yes.